We've just taken a call from Simon in Glasgow, who's come up with an election slogan for you.
Oh, right, what's Simon's slogan?
This slogan reads, "An independent Scotland would be like Greece without the weather."
Well, I have to say I'm not a big fan of talking Scotland down, but what I will say is that there's lots that we can do, but we do have an underperforming economy in Scotland. We're one quarter away from recession under an SNP that's made it the highest tax part of the UK, that's doubled elements of business rates for businesses across the country, and you can see what the nationalists and having politicians that care more about breaking up Britain does, and the people that are focusing on the things that matter, like the economy. So I'm working incredibly hard to make sure that we can put on votes and seats in this election. We can start turning that nationalist tide in Scotland, and we can start returning our economy to what it could be.
Now, the SNP is still way above 40% in the opinion polls in Scotland. Maybe not quite where they were, but still sort of a good performance in the polls. But you've said that Theresa May is more in touch with Scots than Nicola Sturgeon. Now, how can a woman who comes from the southeast of England be more in touch with Scotland than Nicola Sturgeon, who comes from Glasgow?
Well, I said on the big issues, actually she comes from Irvine, but I said on the big issues of the day in Scotland, so whether we want to have another independence referendum or not, the Prime Minister is on the side of the majority of Scots who don't want it. Whether we want to separate off from the rest of the UK, the Prime Minister is on the side of the majority of Scots who don't want it, and Nicola Sturgeon is flying in the face of that, and that's why we're seeing in Scotland now a big shift in the polls. I think the last poll for the Times just yesterday showed a sort of 27% swing between the election in 2015 and now between the SNP and the Conservatives, because people across Scotland know that a vote for the Conservatives is the best way to get SNP MPs out, and it's the best way to help keep our country together.
Do you think the appeal of nationalism is slightly on the wane in Scotland now?
Well, I think that I think Nicola Sturgeon made a couple of very basic errors, and I think the first one that she did was to try and weaponise Brexit and showed that all she cares about is independence, because there are lots of issues that Brexit throws up, but none of them are answered by splitting up the UK, which is Scotland's biggest market, closest allies and greatest friends. And I think the second issue that she's done, that she's made a huge mistake on, is trying to pretend that everybody who voted Remain, that Remain vote is somehow a proxy for independence. Now, there are plenty of people like me who voted Remain, who campaigned quite hard for Remain, who are absolutely furious that she's trying to pretend that I was somehow saying that vote meant we should break up the United Kingdom, when it meant nothing of the sort. But she suffered a really strong backlash about that.
You've had a good go at Nicola Sturgeon there, but what about the question that I asked about whether nationalism is seen to be on the wane, and how can you take advantage of that?
Well, I think it is, and I think people are looking around the world, and we're seeing there was a big rise of nationalist movements in lots of countries, and we've seen even in some of the results that in other European countries, we're seeing that maybe that tide is beginning to turn. But I think in Scotland, I mean, to have a general election in 2015 that was just 6 months after such a seismic thing as the referendum, of course that question was one of the biggest questions in there. And I think that you'll see in this election, you'll see quite a big amount of movement in the polls and in the votes. And we've got a really good indicator that's coming in just a week's time. If you just hang on for 6 days, there will be millions of Scots that go to the polls across the country. Every single town hall in Scotland is up for grabs, every single council position, over 1,000 of them. And we'll see exactly where the country lies.